Welcome to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Teresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Teresa Tomeo.
And it's a Thursday. It's June 19th. Thanks for joining us on this edition of Catholic Connection. And wow, big news out of the Supreme Court yesterday. Thanks be to God. A big decision coming down. And it's good news for those who are trying to defend children. So important, because the Supreme Court decided to uphold the ban in the state of Tennessee regarding mutilating surgeries for minors. And of course, the media and the so-called trans community are all up in arms. But the story that's not being covered, and we'll get Father Mitch's reaction to this as well, who's coming up shortly after the news and the weather, is all the detransitioners who are speaking out, especially a young woman known as Chloe Cole, probably the most well-known detransitioner. She has a full-time speaking ministry and outreach now to those who are thinking about quote-unquote transitioning, and warning them about the dangers and how her life will forever be changed and not for the good because of what she went through. So it's super important, and it really, again, affirms the dignity of the human person made in the image and likeness of God, male and female. And that is not the type of help that young people, especially minors who may be struggling with gender dysphoria, need in terms of being pushed into life-altering surgeries that turn them into lifelong patients. So we'll discuss that decision in the news and also with Father Mitch Pacwa. And then we're going to check in with our friends Greg and Julie Alexander for our mornings on marriage. And we're going to take a look at some of the statements the Holy Father has made on marriage and his emphasis on family, and get their perspectives so far on the new pontificate. That is the first hour of the program. Second hour, more on this whole transgender issue. We'll get to that in a minute. Now, the weather is really serious. We have a couple of stories in the news because you've got both heat and you've got strong thunderstorms impacting a large portion of the country. So let's get to the weather right now before we get to the news. The National Weather Service saying strong to potentially severe storms with damaging wind gusts are forecast today from parts of New England into the Mid-Atlantic and the Carolinas, and significant heat will expand across the west and central plains through tomorrow. And they're saying potentially it could break daily high temperature records, and dangerous heat will then build into the eastern part of the country through the weekend and much of next week. And summer, of course, is beginning in the next 2 days, both in the U.S. and around the world. In Europe, it actually starts on Saturday, I believe, on the 21st. It is a Thursday morning. It's June 19th. We so appreciate your listenership here on Catholic Connection. Coming up in the program, as we mentioned, in the first hour, we have Father Mitch Pacwa and then Greg and Julie Alexander and our mornings on marriage. We do have to get to the news, and there's a ton of it, so let's get started right now to bring you up to date on all that's happening in and around the world here at EWTN. Well, as we mentioned, the Supreme Court in a 6-3 decision yesterday ruling to uphold Tennessee's ban on medical procedures on transgender-identifying youth. The ruling marking, as Catholic News Agency explains, a significant victory for Tennessee and 25 other states with similar restrictions on medical interventions such as puberty blockers, hormone therapy, and surgeries for minors. The Attorney General on X of the state of Tennessee describing the ruling as a landmark victory for Tennessee, emphasizing its role in defending America's children. Tennessee's defense was supported by 24 Republican state attorneys general, Republican governors, the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, who also issued a statement 2 years ago opposing surgeries that mutilate the human body. And conservative legal and policy groups joined as well, along with detransitioners who no longer identify as transgender. And writing for the majority, Chief Justice John Roberts stating this case carries with it the weight of fierce scientific and policy debates about the safety, efficacy, and propriety of medical treatments in an evolving field. He said the voices in these debates raise sincere concerns, and the implications for all are profound. The National Eucharistic Congress changing its route and agenda for the conclusion of the 2025 National Eucharistic Pilgrimage in Los Angeles is Sunday, citing safety concerns. Catholic News Agency also has this story reporting it will no longer include a Eucharistic procession through downtown L.A. Instead, it will remain on the grounds of the Cathedral of Our Lady of the Angels, and the festival that was to follow the procession has been canceled entirely. The change following recent riots in L.A. over deportations of illegal immigrants. The unrest began, of course, in early June. More than 500 people have been arrested, and the Los Angeles mayor only recently lifted a curfew. National Eucharistic Congress President Jason Shanks saying the change of plans is designed to ensure the safety of those taking part, while still providing an opportunity for the people of God to come together in prayer and community. Again, that's according to the National Eucharistic Congress President Jason Shanks. Mark Mayfield tells us the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Iran will pay a heavy price after a missile hit a hospital in southern Israel.
Netanyahu made the statement on X this morning after an Iranian missile landed on a hospital in Beersheba. Israeli police say 20 patients were evacuated from the hospital, though the extent of the damage is still not clear. The Israeli military says Iran launched dozens of ballistic missiles at Israel overnight, including the one that struck the hospital. I'm Mark Mayfield.
President Trump, meanwhile, says he did meet with his national security team yesterday to talk about possible next moves in the Iran-Israel conflict. Speaking to reporters again about the nuclear deal Iran left on the table.
We'll see what happens. Got a ways to go. They should have made the deal. I had a great deal for them. They should have made that deal. 60 days we talked about it, and in the end they decided not to do it, and now they wish they did it.
Again, Trump huddling with his advisors this week and is still weighing possible U.S. offensive strikes against Iran. Meanwhile, Scott Pringle tells us officials are holding a welcome home celebration in New Jersey this afternoon for a Tenafly native who was being held hostage by Hamas.
Edon Alexander was set free last month after being in captivity for nearly 600 days, and now he makes his return to his hometown in Tenafly, New Jersey. The 21-year-old is believed to be the final American hostage held by Hamas. The Tenafly High School grad signed up to join the Israel Defense Forces when he was 18 years old. He was captured during the October 7, 2023 Hamas attack on Israel. Scott Pringle, NBC News Radio, New Jersey.
And as we mentioned earlier in the weather forecast, severe weather impacting the Midwest today. Millions on alert in major cities such as Chicago and Detroit, Indianapolis and St. Louis. Storms may bring damaging winds, hail, and possible tornadoes. This after the last few days saw confirmed tornadoes in Minnesota and Nebraska. Tomorrow, the Northeast is forecast to be hit with severe weather as the system shifts toward the Atlantic. And speaking of the weather, as we also mentioned, temps are soaring in parts of the eastern U.S. as a heat dome threatens to break records over the weekend. Some 15 million people from Washington, D.C. to the state of Florida are at risk, according to the National Weather Service. The State Department says foreign citizens who apply for student visas will have their social media accounts screened for hostility toward the U.S. Department officials said yesterday that new student visa applicants will be asked to make their social media accounts public for the review, and that officers at U.S. consulates will be looking for any indication of hostility toward the citizens, culture, government institutions, or founding principles of the U.S. Jack Cronin tells us a San Diego military contractor now pleading guilty.
The U.S. Attorney's Office says 57-year-old John Washburn, the general manager of San Diego Powder and Protective Coatings in El Cajon, is pleading guilty to engaging in a pattern or practice of hiring undocumented immigrants without authorization to work. As part of the plea, Washburn admitted he knew at least 10 workers were undocumented and that 3 were living at the company warehouse where U.S. Navy submarine components were being stored. The federal complaint says Washburn knew of the immigration issues and only assigned legal employees to work on military bases where they'd be subject to additional screening, while the others stayed and worked at the warehouse. I'm Jack Cronin.
Karen Reed is being found not guilty of murder. She spoke after leaving the courthouse yesterday.
No one has fought harder for justice for John O'Keefe than I have, and my team.
Jurors found that she did not hit her Boston cop boyfriend, John O'Keefe, with her SUV after a night of drinking back in 2022. Her lawyers arguing she was being framed by police for his death. A jury finding that she was not guilty on second-degree murder and manslaughter charges, but did find her guilty of driving under the influence. Her first trial ended in mistrial due to a hung jury. And Sarah Lee Kessler tells us Albany, New York is turning down death benefits for the children of Missiotosis Familia, an NYPD detective killed in the line of duty.
The Assembly has failed to fix a gap in a state law that would have provided death benefits to the children of Detective Mia Soto's familia, gunned down in the Bronx in 2017, leaving her 20-year-old daughter Genesis to adopt and raise her two younger siblings.
And I'm keeping my promise to her now.
New York City Council Speaker Adrienne Adams has released a statement saying she's disappointed in the Assembly for failing to recognize that giving death benefits to spouses and parents but not to children is unfair. Just last week, the council unanimously passed a home rule message supporting legislation that would right what Adams said was wrong. I'm Sarah Lee Kessler.
An assembly member from the farms of California is saying he supports immigration, but people also want law and order.
We can't incentivize criminal activity by allowing people, or even allowing farmers or different individuals to take advantage of those that have committed a crime coming into this country.
Fresno Assemblymember David Tainga says people need to become citizens to stay here. He recently sponsored his mother becoming a legal citizen and said people need to follow the rules and have trust in the system. The Federal Reserve is leaving interest rates unchanged, marking the fourth straight time the central bank has kept rates ready and steady. Federal Chair Jerome Powell speaking after that decision.
We believe that the current stance of monetary policy leaves us well positioned to respond in a timely way to potential economic developments.
Rates will remain high and hover between 4.25% and 4.5%. Mortgage rates are near 7%, and the average credit card rate is north of 20%. The president has been pressuring Powell to cut the rates. And Kraft Heinz says it will phase out food, drug, and cosmetic, or FD&C, artificial dyes from its products by the end of 2027. Dr. David Jakubitz, president of the Medical Society of the State of New York, says it comes as the FDA is looking to eliminate synthetic petroleum-based dyes from foods.
Certain things that are associated with either carcinogens or irritation in the stomach or hypersensitivity, or one of them specifically related to potential genetic changes.
Kraft Heinz also says it will not be launching any new product with the affected dyes. It says currently 10% of its products sold in the U.S. use FD&C colors. And this Friday, by the way, tomorrow will be, as Tammy Trujillo tells us, the longest day of the year.
The summer solstice falls on June 20th in the U.S. and on the 21st in Europe. On that day, the Earth will achieve its maximum tilt toward the sun, allowing for more hours of sunlight in the northern hemisphere and kicking off the summer months. The closer you get to the North Pole, the more extra sunlight you'll enjoy. Residents in Fairbanks, Alaska, for instance, will see nearly 22 hours of daylight. In the southern hemisphere, meanwhile, Friday will mark the winter solstice, making it the shortest day of the year. I'm Tammy Trujillo.
And anyone interested in barbecue may want to be in Washington, D.C. this weekend. The 33rd annual National Capital Barbecue Battle will be held along Pennsylvania Avenue both Saturday and Sunday. Pitmasters from around the country will compete for some big prizes, while spectators can also have a great time enjoying some free samples, music, and other activities. More information about the event is available online at barbecue or bbqindc.com. It is a Thursday morning, June 19th, 2025. Great to be with you on a Thursday and every day here at Catholic Connection. A busy day news-wise as well. As you heard at the top of the hour, a big decision from the Supreme Court yesterday. And we'll get the reaction of the one, the only, Father Mitch Pacwa with our cultural connections. All about the Supreme Court upholding a ban on minor mutilating surgeries in the state of Tennessee. And also see what he has to say about the developments in Israel. All of that, plus you, on a Thursday. Stay tuned. Welcome back. It is a Thursday morning, and that means we have our very own Father Mitch Pacwa with us from EWTN. So, Father, big decision that came down yesterday from the Supreme Court, and those who are obviously in favor of making sure children are protected, I'd say this is a huge victory for protecting minors. Just let me revisit the story for those who may have not heard the decision that came down. And you can find it, by the way, a full report on the National Catholic Register and the Catholic News Agency websites. The U.S. Supreme Court, in a 6-3 decision yesterday, ruling to uphold Tennessee's ban on medical procedures on transgender identifying youth. The ruling marks a significant victory for Tennessee and 25 other states with similar restrictions on medical interventions, such as puberty blockers, hormone therapy, and surgeries for minors. So, Father, this is something that the bishops have spoken out against, of course, of these mutilating surgeries very strongly, and focusing on the dignity of the human person and giving real help to people who are struggling with gender dysphoria. I do think this is a big victory, and I'm hoping, my prayer is that people will start listening to the voices of these detransitioners, the Chloe Coles of the world, and these medical experts who used to be all in on this and are changing their mind. Perhaps this will get people to think twice, people who've supported this. What do you think?
Well, a couple things. Yes, I think it will get people to rethink their commitment to all this. I hope it does. And when we're dealing with the court system, Supreme and the other lower courts, we are very much dealing with the problem of the law does not make it. Once it's made into law, all they can do is act on the law. And then the Supreme Court looks at this law from Tennessee to see if it is contrary to the U.S. Constitution. And other than what is written in the law by legislators and other leaders, they can't make the decision on the basis of the same morals. Sometimes they do bring in moral principles, but it has to be something grounded in law. And that's why the bishops and we have to look at this from the much broader perspective of the way that morality works. The Supreme Court can more easily use issues from science. That can be included because the issue of science is whether or not this kind of treatment is painful, harmful to the person, reduces longevity, etc. They can use that as a principle. And so our argument is going to be of three different kinds. We as Catholics, first of all, look at this issue through the lens of what is God's law and what is the meaning of human dignity. That is our primary focus. But then we also have to take a look at the science and what is going on, and why I also hope that the medical places in Tennessee, like my own alma mater's medical school, Vanderbilt Medical School, where famously the chairman of I think it was the endocrinology department or one of the other departments, had said these surgeries are funding our whole department. And she just blatantly said that. And I said, well, what about the science? You should be looking at it. Well, what we see is that the science is, in so many very important ways, supportive of Catholic teaching about the integrity of the human person, because the science shows that people who have sex change surgery and then the ongoing treatment are their lives are cut by 50%. It's a 50% reduction in life expectancy because of the surgeries. And then I just was looking at news, and they're reporting on one of the studies that shows the suicide rate of those who don't get the surgery and the attempts at suicide is still fairly low. They have a lot of dysphoria, they're very anxious, but after they have surgery, the suicide rate goes up to 40 to 60%. It's worse than the earlier studies I had seen showed 42% suicide rate. Now they're saying it goes up as the longer a person lives, it can be up to 60%. Now, this is saying that this is very dangerous. You can't omit that quality of the high risk, not to mention encouraging young people to make a decision that we don't allow them to make in other areas that are not life-threatening, such as having a tattoo. We don't allow them legally to smoke cigarettes, even though the life expectancy of a cigarette smoker is about 30 years greater than someone who has had sex change surgery. Now, don't get me wrong, that doesn't mean I'm supporting cigarettes. I don't smoke, I don't support cigarettes. But something as dangerous as smoking cigarettes is not nearly as dangerous. That reduces life expectancy by 10 years, whereas sex change surgery reduces it by 40 years. These are important facts, and the law can include those facts. And we should include that as background and support for our moral position. Our moral position would be held no matter what the research is, because we talk about the inherent dignity of the person and the integrity of the person. But we also happen to see that the the science supports our moral
Supports
position.
the morality. I was just going to say a moral position. And this reminds me of what happens, Father, and I just want to ask you a question about this before we take a break. We have about a minute left, of the abortion industry and the refusal to listen to women and men who are post-abortive, or doctors who have come up with the research of post-abortion syndrome and all the problems associated with abortion and all the health issues that women face afterwards, both physical and mental.
The increase
ignoring
of
all the science.
Right.
Yeah.
Because they also have a moral position, and they have dare I say this, they have a doctrinal position. And their moral position is that there are too many people in the world. We must reduce human population or we're going to destroy the planet. And the doctrine is that human personality is like silly putty. You can make it in any shape you wish. It is up to you to define yourself. And even science cannot be a factor. You decide who you are. And in the name of their ideology, and even when science goes against them, they will hold on to it. They put themselves, ironically, in the position of doctrinaire members of the old Spanish Inquisition.
Yeah, very true. Father, we have more to discuss with this and look forward to it. I have some quotes from Chloe Cole, who wrote an article for the New York Post regarding the decision and how she's so glad that this happened, because she doesn't want other young people to go through what she's still going through. Talking with Father Mitch Pacwa about the Supreme Court decision yesterday, handed down, upholding Tennessee's ban on medical procedures on transgender-identifying youth. American children are safer thanks to the Supreme Court. Specifically, they're safer from the radical transgender ideology that endangers their developing minds and bodies. As someone who was seduced by activists' lies when I was just 12 years old, I'm glad the court is putting kids first. Thousands of kids will now be protected from disturbing treatments that ruin young lives. On Wednesday, the court upheld a Tennessee law that effectively bans so-called gender-affirming care for kids. Another 26 states have passed similar laws since sex change treatments for minors are a direct threat to children's physical and mental health. Puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones have irreversible effects and lifelong health complications. Father, this is part of a column written and posted just yesterday in reaction to the Supreme Court decision by Chloe Cole, who's probably one of the most well-known detransitioners, who really has an outreach now to other people who've experienced so many negative side effects from buying into the lies of the culture. And the article or the column, the headline, if folks want to look it up, is "As a Girl Misled by Trans Activists, I Cheer the Supreme Court and Demand a National Ban." It was posted yesterday afternoon. Your thoughts, Father, on Chloe Cole's comments?
Yeah, well, she's experiencing what is going on. This is not a theory as far as she's concerned. This is a painful reality. And the various losses that are entailed are important. You know, let me just mention another element. When somebody has sex change operation, they have to take hormones of the opposite sex. And here's something else I'd just like to point out. We're talking about sex change, not gender. Gender is a factor in grammar. It's a grammatical structure. It's not something of the level of science as such. It is something that entails one's physical sexuality. And the problem with those who must take those hormones, and they really have no choice after they'll die without the hormone treatment, but they're going to also die in part because of the hormone treatment. Because no matter what surgery they have, at the cellular level, that's every single cell in a human body, your toenail, your hair, and everything in between has your DNA in it. And within that DNA, that includes your sex that you're born with. And that is either XX in the case of women or XY. And there are a couple for men. And there are a couple variations like XXY and a couple others, but that those are slight, and they don't have any relationship to, as far as what I've seen in research, they don't have any relationship to the way a person feels about themselves. It's just a physical fact. But your as a woman, your XX cells throughout your whole body are expecting estrogen as one of the many stimulants from the endocrine system. That's your hormones are produced in the endocrine system, and then but along with other hormones, and every cell in my body is expecting testosterone because of my XY chromosome, and this is what makes my body work. And I've used this analogy before, but the doctor told me this makes sense. It's like putting gasoline into a diesel engine or diesel fuel into a gas engine. It's not going to work. Diesel oil will clog up a gasoline engine, and gasoline will burn up a diesel engine. It's more complicated than that, of course. Engines are simple machines relative to the body, but that is kind of an analogy. And you cannot mess with this part of human life and with impunity. This is exactly one of the points about the military paying for this transgender surgery. When they have the surgery, they cannot be in combat for 2 years because it takes 2 years to recover from it. And if they ever recover, and then you have to have the hormone treatments every every day of your life. You can never be in combat if you're dependent on such hormonal treatment. You just can't. This was a nutty social experiment by nutty professor types, but without the sense of humor of the nutty professor. This is something that, we as Catholics then also have another responsibility.
That was my
People
next question.
still
What's
have.
our responsibility?
Yeah. Our responsibility is on a couple of levels. One, we don't follow propaganda. We follow solid moral teaching, which is based on logic and what it means to be human. As a Christian, made in the image and likeness of God, we are not silly putty. We are made in the image and likeness of God. God is still molding us like clay into his image, but we use the facts of human existence to promote our moral position and think through this. That's what moral theology is about. Father Tad Pachalczyk and others who are doing great work in medical ethics are thinking about this. Not like, I don't feel that, I don't like this. No, it has nothing to do with like. They are clear, solidly based thinkers using the best science they can get and their moral principles. That is our responsibility, to think and research and not follow, just moods in the culture. Secondly, we have a responsibility to promote what is good for the human person. And thirdly, because there are people who feel dysphoria, a high percentage of which are on the spectrum for autism, a high percentage of whom have been sexually abused. And our concern for them is to say, what can we do to help you? Not just by throwing a dangerous so-called quick fix, a quick fix that will shorten your life and make you incapable of ever being a parent. Which, if you're 12 years old and thinking about sex change surgery, you should not be hoping to become a parent then. But that option is gone for the rest of your life when you do think about such things. And we want to be available and help other people who are expert at ministering to the problem at its core and not a slapdash solution.
Amen. And some information in the Catholic News Agency article as well, with some links that people might find helpful. We'll be right back on a Thursday morning with our Mornings on Marriage with Julie and Greg Alexander. Stay tuned. Minutes past the hour. It's a Thursday. It's June 19th. Appreciate your listenership and appreciate the great ministry of my dear friends Greg and Julie Alexander from the Alexander House, a marriage coaching ministry. And they join us about once a month for Mornings on Marriage. And I couldn't help but think of you two lovebirds when our new Pope came out and right away spoke about marriage and family very strongly and very clearly. And I know that that's what you want to focus on. And Greg, I'll go to you first. Let's talk about your first reactions to the Pope's early statements on family and marriage. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, you're welcome, Teresa. It's great to be here as always. And first, yes, I'd like to start with the fact that, of course, marriage is the foundation of our society. And it's great that our Holy Father began, with that statement about marriage, because it's a strong affirmation of what we believe and what Julie and I have been teaching our couples for years, that marriage and families aren't just social constructs. This is a sacred institution instituted by God and elevated to a sacrament by Christ. And it's a place where, in a sense, God's love is made visible to the world, to include our children. But again, Pope Leo put into words what we've seen in real life, and that means God meets us in our mess. And, of course, Julie and I and you and Deacon Dom know about that all too well, that God is there. He's physically present in our lives with that grace that allows us to get through the difficulties, that allows us to be able to parent, and more importantly, that allows us to be able to demonstrate his love in and through each other in the relationship.
And Julie, what did you think?
Well, again, Teresa, I'd like to even just repeat when he said that the families are privileged places in which to encounter Jesus and the cradle of the future of humanity. And I was blown away. I mean, it's exactly what we need to hear right now, because you think about that, where it's a privilege to be in families. So often you see the brokenness and the woundedness, and now more than ever, you hear people, complaining about where they came from, complaining about what's going on, but it's all about grace and thanksgiving and the things that we do for and with each other to show how Christ is present in our midst. It's the domestic church. It's here, right here, through sacrifice, through love. Life itself is given, and that's where Jesus is present, because we go on and we think God is always in the extraordinary, like we leave our homes and go to church to see God. We should be seeing God and Jesus Christ right here in our midst by the way we love, talk to, and treat one another.
Yeah, and the fact that he's saying that privileged places in which to encounter Jesus, that I think too, and Greg, I'll go back to you, that he's affirming the fact that parents and families, this is the first place people are going to encounter Christ, right? And this is also involving the family in that faithful education.
Absolutely. Going back to what I said earlier, the family is the foundation. And, of course, the foundation of that family relationship begins there in the home, of course, as our church refers to it as the domestic church. And so it's all the things that we do in the home. In fact, our belated Holy Father John Paul the Great would always say that it's the school of love. It's where we teach our kids about the faith. It's where we teach them about relationship. It's where we teach them how to love. And so everything that we do in the home will eventually flow over into our church and into our society and to the rest of the world. And so we have to come to realize, again, the importance of the family relationship, again, the very place where we can have that opportunity to encounter Christ on a daily basis.
Yeah, and even the word, Teresa, I'm so sorry, the word that just stuck out to me was cradle. A mother cradles the baby and then puts the baby in a cradle, even Jesus Christ himself. Look at Mother Mary. He himself was held in her arms and born in a stable, put in a cradle. With all of it goes back to living out what it means to be Christian, what it means to live like Christ.
Yeah, and if I could dovetail on that as well, Teresa, because I think having the practical things, because people hear that, and it sounds like this esoteric thing, and as Julie mentioned earlier, we have to be in the physical church. But again, it starts right there in our home. And it can start with something as simple as prayer. Even as we instruct couples that we work with at night before they retire, come together, hold hands. Husbands start with Our Father. Wives respond to Hail Mary. And then taking turns noting to God something that your spouse did for you that day. Or again, in our meal blessings and things of that nature. So these simple things that we do, simple as it may sound, there are indeed ways that we allow God and Christ to reside in our homes.
So that was my next point, and you bring this up, and you just gave us some really good suggestions, because people hear this idea, as you said, it may sound very esoteric to so many people. It's a privileged place, the family, in which to encounter Jesus. So what does that mean to me? What do you mean encounter Jesus? I thought that was something that I had to do with my kids when I dropped them off at Catholic school, or for their catechism classes, or when we go to Mass each week. How do I do that in my home? And you just outlined several things. So in addition to those practical suggestions, what else can people do in the home to make this their home a place to encounter Christ? And Greg, I'll go to you first.
It's simple things. Again, one of the things we really try to call to mind for couples is that when we look at Christ, and we look at his different ways of demonstrating love, sacrificial love, merciful love, unconditional love. And so in our marriage relationships, we have the opportunity to allow Christ's presence to be felt when we sacrifice our wants, needs, and desires for our beloved, or when we extend mercy on our spouse when he or she transgresses us, or when we love unconditionally, where you don't have to do anything for me, I'm just going to love you because it is my call, my duty, my responsibility in this vocation called marriage. And again, Teresa, when we do those simple things, and many people don't think about it this way, but when we do those things, we allow our spouse to experience the very love of Jesus. Again, we allow for his presence to be felt. And we can quite simply go to Christ when he confronted Saul. He says, Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? And we know that he was not persecuting the person of Jesus, but he was persecuting the people in which Jesus resided. And so when we in our physical ourselves demonstrate these things in the home, again, we become the presence of Christ and allow our spouse to experience Christ, love, care, compassion, forgiveness, right there in the very home.
This is awesome stuff. Very practical. We're talking with Greg and Julie Alexander of the Alexander House, thealexanderhouse.org, and we're doing a sold-out marriage pilgrimage in October. We are learning about marriage through the eyes of the Saints of Umbria, and we'll probably be doing another one because we have a waiting list, as a matter of fact, of about, I think, 5 or 6, 7 or 8 couples that wanted to join us. But I wanted to pick up on the sacrifice end of it because it can be little sacrifices. It doesn't have to be, let's say, major things. I mean, obviously, yes. But, Julie, even little things like, for example, this morning when we were driving back to our little house in Umbria, and Deacon Dom is blaring the country music, which you know is like nails on a chalkboard to me. I'd much rather be playing, Earth, Wind, and Fire or Jeffrey Osborne or whatever, But I didn't say anything. I just let it play, and I offered it up, and it was like the longest 15, 20 minutes of my day. But he's a good man. But I mean, I'm joking, but little things like that do make a difference, I think, at the end of the day.
Oh, absolutely, Teresa. It's not about agreeing on everything, but it does mean choosing to act as one, so that you bit your tongue and that you sang along. I could just hear you now. And when you and your husband both are united, even in the struggle, it reflects the unity of the Trinity, and that's what we're talking about. It's all about forgiveness. It's all about coming together in humility and just really coming. We have to be humble to pray. And it's in all those actions that we do to then come and realize that, am I acting like Christ or am I not? Because the selfishness of the world has crept into every single one of us, every single one of our marriages. And when we start saying it's all about me, that's when things go south, because it's not good. When we start saying, I die to myself for the sake of the beloved, as you said, the sacrifice for another, then that's when you start to realize the understanding of how I can live out Christ in my marriage.
Yeah. And again, Teresa, from that sacrificial standpoint, it could be something as simple as, I could be going to play ball with the guys on Saturday, but yet Julie wakes up Saturday morning and says, wow, it's a beautiful day. Why don't we and the kids go to the park? Well, the decision is very easy for me. I'm going to pick up the phone, call the guys, say, hey, guys, guess what? Julie wants to hang out with the kids at the park. I'll catch you next week. And again, something so simple, that sacrifice, going without, as Julie mentioned, dying to self for the sake of the beloved. And so doing something that she wants as opposed to something that I want to do, again, in those simple things.
And Teresa, it can even be something as so simple as when we're in the house that I have so much to do. I'm cooking. I'm seeing the house needs to be straightened up. And Greg says, come sit on the couch. I could go, what? Are you kidding me? I got to get all this stuff done. I got to do this. I got to do that. But when he says, come sit on the couch, guess what? I go sit on the couch. He lays down in my lap. I hold him for a bit. And then we get up and he starts helping me with the dinner, with the cleaning. And it's just the reciprocal act of sacrificing for one another.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so there's so much here, and we may have to pick some of this up next month, but I want to jump down to the great point you made about people who are really, really struggling right now, because it's one thing if you have a good marriage and you work at it and you love each other and you get generally the ideas and concepts that we're talking about. But what about someone who is listening and feels their marriage right now is beyond repair? Greg, what would you say to them?
Yeah, first of all, Teresa, I'd like to tell them that you're not alone. Again, God created marriage because he wants to be intimately woven into the very fabric of a marriage relationship. But too many times we forget about the fact that God is there and we try to take it alone. Again, marriage is a sacrament. There's a grace that's there. And all the grace we need to help to forgive each other, to transcend those hurts and pains, to be there to love, to care, and all those different things, there is a grace in the sacrament. And so, again, for those individuals who find themselves in such a place, start with that fact, coming together and just going to God in prayer, in humility. And Father, Julie and I have made some terrible decisions in our lives that has allowed us to be in this bad place. And Father, right now I ask you for the grace to be able to rise above the things that I have experienced and to extend that forgiveness as your Son Jesus extended forgiveness to us. But more importantly, Father, fortify my will to get me to engage and do the things, and sometimes those things I don't want to do, but that I know that I need to do in order for our marriage to be okay. And talking to God is just like talking to our friends, expressing to him in humility What are the things we want? What are the things we need? What are the things we desire that's going to help us grow stronger in our marriage relationship?
And I'd like to say, Teresa.
Oh, sure. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, just to add to that, because we see it often, I know it happened with us, is don't believe the lie that it's too late or way too much has been done. There's nothing that we can do to get past this. Your yes to your marriage still matters. God hasn't given up on you. God is committed fully to your marriage. And when you commit to your marriage, then that's two of you. And to love and to know and to place everything in the lap of the Blessed Mother and in Jesus Christ and say, Jesus, I trust in you. Help me to love beyond everything that I've ever been given, because he, God himself, Jesus Christ, can bring healing. No matter how broken things feel right now, there is hope for every marriage if we surrender and offer it to Christ and say, God, help me.
That was what I was going to say, is that your marriage and my marriage, if you were to look at it from the outside, 35 years ago, people would have said, you've got to be kidding me. These four people are hopeless. Their relationships are hopeless, right? Because it was broken. Your relationship was broken. My relationship was broken. And yet we didn't give up. We came back to the church. It wasn't easy, but little by little, just through many of the steps that you suggested, and sometimes just by our own, stupidity of not being stubborn and saying, okay, we're going to stick with this, God came in and worked it out. It's not easy, but boy, when you get through this, you appreciate your marriage so much more. Guys, this is fantastic. Focusing on this beautiful quote from the Holy Father: families are privileged places in which to encounter Jesus, the cradle of the future of humanity. And I just want to pick up, we're out of time, but pick up on one of the last points that you made in the great notes that you send me in terms of how do you start? Just start, as you said, Julie, praying together. Doesn't have to be complicated. Get up in the morning, say the Hail Mary, the Glory Be, the Our Father. Start with that. Pray for each other during the day. Come back and say a prayer at night. Do the Mass readings together. Read the reflection together. Start there, and God will come in and things will happen. Check out the great website of the Alexanders, thealexanderhouse.org, Mornings on Marriage. I'm going to pick up this topic again in our next month because there's a whole lot of other stuff we didn't get to that's really, really good. We'll be right back. Don't forget to check out the great work of Julie and Greg Alexander. Come and have them do a marriage retreat at your parish or your diocese, or maybe you want to do a date night for couples. They do it all, thealexanderhouse.org. I'm going to pick up on some of the other points that they brought out about the beautiful statements of the Holy Father, how right out of the gate he's talking about the importance of family and marriage. Coming up in the next hour, we mentioned prayer. We're going to be looking at that topic with a postulator for the cause of Venerable Patrick Peyton. Remember, he's the priest who coined the phrase, when the family prays together, stays together. There's also a movie, of course, you may have heard about it, Pray, the Story of Patrick Peyton. We'll discuss coming up. Prior to that, though, I want to play the audio from a compelling video, the testimony of Chloe Cole last year, a detransitioner, when she went before Congress, and there was all kinds of discussion on what was happening with this push for these mutilating so-called transgender or transitioning surgeries for minors and other people. And she talked about her experience, and truly I think this story is as big, if not bigger, than what happened with the abortion industry and what is still happening. And also the overall so-called sexual revolution, our overly sexualized culture, where we were sold such a bill of goods and told that we can do anything we want with our bodies, with whomever, whatever, whenever. We can say we're this, we can say we're that, it doesn't matter, and everything will be truly wonderful. And yet there is so much evidence, so many personal testimonies and more being ignored, poo-pooed, pushed aside by those who continue to lie. We have to get the truth out there, and people like Chloe Cole are making a difference. That's coming up next on Catholic Connection in the second hour on EWTN Radio Extra. Stay tuned.
Welcome to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Teresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Teresa Tomeo.
And it is a Thursday. It's June 19th. You're listening to the second hour of Catholic Connection, an EWTN production, as you just heard, on EWTN's Radio Extra. Appreciate your listenership on a Thursday and every day. We have a full show for you again this hour, much to discuss. In the Two Sets segment, shortly after the news and the weather, we're going to share with you, as I mentioned earlier, if you're listening to the first hour of the program, a video, the testimony actually, was from a video that was recorded last year in Congress. I think it was late last year. Chloe Cole, who's probably one of the most well-known detransitioners, a young woman who thought that because of some of the struggles she was having psychologically, that becoming or trying to change her sex to become a boy, which we know is impossible, she thought that might be the answer. Well, it was the worst thing she ever did. Ended up having a double mastectomy and other procedures, just to name a few, and practically destroyed her life. And she's trying to regroup and get her life back together. But in the meantime, she's helping others, which is so amazing. She did a very good editorial for the New York Post. I'll share some of that. And then we'll hear the clip of her talking about her experience. And as I said in the first hour, we were chatting about this with Father Mitch Pacwa. It reminds me so much of what's still happening with the culture and the abortion industry. All the thousands upon thousands upon thousands upon thousands of women and men who experience such negative fallout when they thought abortion or helping someone procure an abortion would be the quick and easy fix to their problems. How their lives spun out of control. They got into, drug addiction, alcohol addiction, other abusive behaviors. Was it last week we were talking about men and post-abortion syndrome? There's a whole body of evidence on that, but the secular press and the culture for the most part, and of course Hollywood, act as if it doesn't exist. And the same thing is happening with the transgender agenda. Not only that, but they're projecting they're trying to say that what happened in Tennessee yesterday is a bad thing when it's actually a good thing. So it's always projection, just like with the abortion industry. So we'll discuss in 2 cents coming up in about 14 minutes or so. And then, the importance of prayer. Nobody knew that better than Father Patrick Peyton, and we're going to talk about him with his vice postulator for the cause of Venerable Patrick Peyton. Father David Marcham is going to be joining us, and we'll also discuss a beautiful film, Pray, the story of Patrick Peyton. So that's what the second hour of Catholic Connection looks like on a Friday as we are moving through the month of June. Weather-wise, we have strong to potentially severe thunderstorms with damaging wind gusts that are forecast for today from parts of New England into the Mid-Atlantic and Carolinas. They're saying significant heat will expand across the west and central plains through tomorrow, and they say that could potentially bring record-breaking high temperatures. So prepare yourself, and dangerous heat will then build into the eastern U.S. this weekend through much of next week as well. So summer is upon us. It is a Thursday morning. We appreciate you, so let's get started with the news here on EWTN. Well, the U.S. Supreme Court, and as we mentioned, we'll be talking about this in our upcoming 2 cents segment, in a 6-3 decision yesterday ruling to uphold Tennessee's ban on medical procedures on transgender-identifying youth. The ruling marking a significant victory for Tennessee and 25 other states with similar restrictions on medical interventions, such as puberty blockers, hormone therapy, and surgeries for minors. Tennessee's Attorney General on X describing the ruling as a landmark victory for his state, emphasizing its role in defending America's children. Tennessee's defense, by the way, was supported by 24 Republican state attorneys general, Republican governors, the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, conservative legal and policy groups, and detransitioners who no longer identify as transgender. Writing for the majority, Chief Justice John Roberts stating this case carries with it the weight of fierce scientific and policy debates about the safety, efficacy, and propriety of medical treatments in an evolving field. He said the voices in these debates raise serious concerns. The implications for all are profound. In other news this morning on a Thursday, the National Eucharistic Congress changing the route and agenda for the conclusion of the 2025 National Eucharistic Pilgrimage in Los Angeles this Sunday, and they're citing safety concerns. Catholic News Agency reporting it will no longer include a Eucharistic procession through downtown L.A., but will instead remain on the grounds of the Cathedral of Our Lady of the Angels, and the festival that was to follow the procession has been canceled now entirely. The change following recent riots in Los Angeles over deportations of illegal immigrants, the unrest beginning in early June. Another big story we're following for you this morning, the developments in the Middle East. Mark Mayfield tells us Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Iran will be paying a heavy price after a missile hit a hospital in southern Israel.
Netanyahu made the statement on X this morning after an Iranian missile landed on a hospital in Beersheba. Israeli police say 20 patients were evacuated from the hospital, though the extent of the damage is still not clear. The Israeli military says Iran launched dozens of ballistic missiles at Israel overnight, including the one that struck the hospital. I'm Mark Mayfield.
President Trump, meanwhile, saying he met with his national security team today to talk about possible next moves in the Iran-Israel conflict, speaking to reporters again yesterday about the deal Iran left on the table.
We'll see what happens. Got a ways to go. They should have made the deal. I had a great deal for them. They should have made that deal. 60 days we talked about it, and in the end they decided not to do it, and now they wish they did it.
Trump huddling with his advisors for long periods of time this week and is continuing to weigh possible U.S. offensive strikes against Iran. Scott Pringle tells us officials holding a welcome home celebration in Tenafly, New Jersey this afternoon for the native there who was being held hostage by Hamas.
Edon Alexander was set free last month after being in captivity for nearly 600 days, and now he makes his return to his hometown in Tenafly, New Jersey. The 21-year-old is believed to be the final American hostage held by Hamas. The Tenafly High School grad signed up to join the Israel Defense Forces when he was 18 years old. He was captured during the October 7, 2023 Hamas attack on Israel. Scott Pringle, NBC News Radio, New Jersey.
And as we mentioned in the weather earlier, severe weather impacting the Midwest today. Millions on alert in major cities, including Chicago, Detroit, Indianapolis, and St. Louis. Storms may bring damaging winds, hail, and possible tornadoes. It comes after the last few days saw confirmed tornadoes in Minnesota and Nebraska. Tomorrow, the Northeast is forecast to be hit with severe weather as the system shifts toward the Atlantic. And temperatures, meanwhile, as we also mentioned, soaring in parts of the eastern part of the country as a heat dome is threatening to break records over the weekend. Some 15 million people from D.C. to Florida are at risk, according to the National Weather Service. And the State Department says foreign citizens who apply for student visas will have their social media accounts screened for hostility toward the U.S. Department officials saying yesterday new student visa applications will be asked to make their social media accounts public for the review, and that officers at U.S. consulates will be looking for any indications of hostility toward the citizens, culture, government institutions, or founding principles of the United States. A San Diego military contractor is pleading guilty to hiring illegal immigrants. Jack Cronin has that story.
The U.S. Attorney's Office says 57-year-old John Washburn, the general manager of San Diego Powder and Protective Coatings in El Cajon, is pleading guilty to engaging in a pattern or practice of hiring undocumented immigrants without authorization to work. As part of the plea, Washburn admitted he knew at least 10 workers were undocumented and that 3 were living at the company warehouse where U.S. Navy submarine components were being stored. Federal complaint says Washburn knew of the immigration issues and only assigned legal employees to work on military bases where they'd be subject to additional screening, while the others stayed and worked at the warehouse. I'm Jack Cronin.
Karen Reed is being found not guilty of murder. She spoke after leaving the courthouse yesterday afternoon.
No one has fought harder for justice for John O'Keefe than I have, and my team.
The jurors finding that she did not hit her Boston police officer boyfriend John O'Keefe with her SUV after a night of drinking 3 years ago, her lawyers arguing she was being framed by police for his death. The jury found her not guilty on second-degree murder and manslaughter, but did find her guilty of driving under the influence. Her first trial ended in a mistrial due to a hung jury. Sarah Lee Kessler tells us Albany, New York, turning down death benefits for the children of Myosotis Familia, a New York Police Department detective killed in the line of duty.
The Assembly has failed to fix a gap in a state law that would have provided death benefits to the children of Detective Myosotis Familia, gunned down in the Bronx in 2017, leaving her 20-year-old daughter Genesis to adopt and raise her 2 younger siblings.
And I'm keeping my promise to her now.
New York City Council Speaker Adrienne Adams has released a statement saying she's disappointed in the Assembly for failing to recognize that giving death benefits to spouses and parents but not to children is unfair. Just last week, the Council unanimously passed a home rule message supporting legislation that would right what Adams said was wrong. I'm Sarah Lee Kessler.
An assembly member from the farms of California says he supports immigration, but he also says people want law and order.
We can't incentivize criminal activity by allowing people or even allowing farmers or different individuals to take advantage of those that have committed a crime coming into this country.
Fresno Assemblyman David Marcham says that people need to become citizens to stay here. He recently sponsored his own mother becoming a legal citizen and says folks need to follow the rules and have trust in the system. The Federal Reserve is leaving interest rates unchanged, marking the fourth straight time the central bank has kept rates steady. Fed Chair Jerome Powell spoke after that decision.
We believe that the current stance of monetary policy leaves us well positioned to respond in a timely way to potential economic developments.
Rates will remain high and hover between 4.25% and 4.5%. Mortgage rate 7%. The average credit card rate north of 20%. President Trump has been pressuring Powell to cut the rates. Kraft Heinz says it will phase out food, drugs, and cosmetic, or FD&C, artificial dyes from its products by the end of 2027. Dr. David Jacobitz, president of the Medical Society of the State of New York, says it comes as the FDA looks to eliminate synthetic petroleum-based dyes from foods.
Certain things that are associated with either carcinogens or irritation in the stomach or hypersensitivity, or one of them specifically related to potential genetic changes.
Kraft Heinz also says it will not launch any new products with the affected dyes. It says currently 10% of its products sold in the U.S. use FD&C colors, including Kool-Aid, Jell-O, and Crystal Light. And Tammy Trujillo tells us this Friday it's going to be the longest day of the year, and you know what that means.
The summer solstice falls on June 20th in the U.S. and on the 21st in Europe. On that day, the Earth will achieve its maximum tilt toward the sun, allowing for more hours of sunlight in the northern hemisphere and kicking off the summer months. The closer you get to the North Pole, the more extra sunlight you'll enjoy. Residents in Fairbanks, Alaska, for instance, will see nearly 22 hours of daylight. In the southern hemisphere, meanwhile, Friday will mark the winter solstice, making it the shortest day of the year. I'm Tammy Trujillo.
And speaking of summer, remember that old saying, I scream, you scream, we all scream for ice cream? Well, we'd scream very loudly when we know it's for free, and as Bree Tennis tells us it is, thanks to Kroger, celebrating the summer solstice tomorrow by giving away ice cream. Yay!
Kroger stores are giving away free ice cream Friday to celebrate the start of summer. There will be competition to get the needed coupon for the limited edition Summer in a Pint giveaway. There are more than 2,700 Kroger grocery stores in the U.S., and the company's giving out 92,000 coupons. You can have a go on Friday starting at noon Eastern Time by going to freekrogericecream.com. I'm Bree Tennis.
Yummo. It is a Thursday. It's almost 14 minutes past the hour. Taking a look at a powerful, powerful article from a young woman who is a detransitioner, Chloe Cole, and another statement she made last year before Congress addressing this issue of so-called transitional surgeries for minors and the long-term fallout. As we mentioned, a huge decision yesterday for the safety of children, thanks be to God, and actually for morality and common sense and science. The Supreme Court upholding a Tennessee law that restricts surgical and medical interventions on minors identifying as transgender. The 6-3 ruling from the court will likely cause wide impact, as 24 other states have similar laws to the one in Tennessee. The law bans mutilating surgeries, puberty blockers, and hormone therapy on children. Well, Father Mitch was saying in the last hour, if you heard our discussion with him, how is this even possible if you think about other things that are prohibited for minors, such as alcohol, such as tobacco? And just think about if a young person said to their parent, you know, I'm good, I have enough education, I'm not going to go past the 5th or 6th grade, I'm good. What would happen? It's called truancy, okay? And the family would be investigated. The children would probably be put in foster care because it would be deemed that those parents weren't doing the right thing in allowing the children to take control of their own lives at such a young age. And yet, when it comes to these surgeries, it's all about supposedly helping young people. Where is the common sense and where is the science? And so many other countries in Europe have realized the problems with, especially starting with these puberty blockers and pressuring these young people to move in this direction. As a matter of fact, there was a big story that broke out of the UK, the ban on puberty blockers. And so far, as of December of last year, it has been made indefinite. So they are continuing with this block on puberty blockers, thanks be to God, in Great Britain, based on good, solid research of medical experts. And boy, this doctor who led the Cass review, her name is Cass, that's her last name, she literally had to go into hiding because she put the truth out there in terms of what was happening with these puberty blockers. So we were talking about Chloe Cole, and during the first segment with Father Mitch, I was reading from her New York Post article, her response to the decision that came down yesterday from the Supreme Court upholding the ban in Tennessee on surgery for minors when it comes to the so-called transgender surgeries. She says America's kids are safer today thanks to the Supreme Court. Specifically, they're safer from radical transgender biology that endangers their developing minds and bodies. As someone who was seduced by activist lies when I was just 12 years old, I'm glad the court is putting kids first. She goes on to say in this New York Post column, thousands of children will now be protected from disturbing treatments that ruin young lives. And she knows this firsthand. Here is a clip from Chloe Cole's testimony last year, giving a stark warning to Congress as they were looking into these so-called surgeries for children. Take a listen.
My name is Chloe Cole, and I am a detransitioner. Another way to put that would be, I used to believe that I was born in the wrong body, and the adults in my life whom I trusted affirmed my belief, and this caused me lifelong, irreversible harm. I speak to you today as a victim of one of the biggest medical scandals in the history of the United States of America. I speak to you in the hope that you will have the courage to bring the scandal to an end and ensure that other vulnerable teenagers, children, and young adults don't go through what I went through. At the age of 12, I began to experience what my medical team would later diagnose as gender dysphoria. I was well into an early puberty, and I was very uncomfortable with the changes that were happening to my body. I was intimidated by male attention, and when I told my parents that I felt like a boy, in retrospect, all I meant was that I hated puberty, that I wanted this newfound sexual attention to go away, that I looked up to my brothers a little bit more than I did to my sisters. I came out as transgender in a letter I sent on the dining room table. My parents were immediately concerned. They felt like they needed to get outside help from medical professionals, but this proved to be a mistake. It immediately set our entire family down a path of ideologically motivated deceit and coercion. The gender specialist I was taken to see told my parents that I needed to be put on puberty-blocking drugs right away. They asked my parents a simple question: would you rather have a dead daughter or a living transgender son? The choice was enough for my parents to let their guard down, and in retrospect, I can't blame them. This was the moment that we all became victims of so-called gender-affirming care. I was fast-tracked onto puberty blockers and then testosterone. The resulting menopausal-like hot flashes made focusing on school impossible. I still get joint pains and weird pops in my back, but they were far worse when I was on the blockers. A month later, when I was 13, I had my first testosterone injection. It's caused permanent changes to my body. My voice will forever be deeper, my jawline sharper, my nose longer, my bone structure permanently masculinized, my Adam's apple more prominent, my fertility unknown. I look in the mirror sometimes and I feel like a monster. I had a double mastectomy at 15. They tested my amputated breast for cancer. And I was cancer-free, of course. I was perfectly healthy. There was nothing wrong with my still developing body or my breasts, other than that, as an insecure teenage girl, I felt awkward about it. After my breasts were taken away from me, the tissue was incinerated. Before I was able to legally drive, I had a huge part of my future womanhood taken from me. I will never be able to breastfeed. I struggle to look at myself in the mirror at times. I still struggle to this day with sexual dysfunction. And I have massive scars across my chest And the skin grafts that they took of my nipples, are weeping fluid today. And they were grafted into a more masculine positioning, they said. After surgery, my grades in school plummeted. Everything that I went through did nothing to address my underlying mental health issues that I had. And my doctors, with their theories on gender, thought that all my problems would go away as soon as I was surgically transformed into something that vaguely resembled a boy. Their theories were wrong. The drugs and surgeries changed my body, but they did not and could not change the basic reality that I am and forever will be a female. When my specialist first told my parents that they could have a dead daughter or a live transgender son, I wasn't suicidal. I was a happy child who struggled because she was different. However, at 16, after my surgery, I did become suicidal. I'm doing better now, but my parents almost got the dead daughter promised to them by my doctors. My doctors had almost created the very nightmare they said they were trying to avoid. So what message do I want to bring to American teenagers and their families? I didn't need to be lied to. I needed compassion. I needed to be loved. I needed to be given therapy to help me work through my issues, not affirm to my delusion that by transforming into a boy, it would solve all my problems. We need to stop telling 12-year-olds that they were born wrong, that they are right to reject their own bodies and feel uncomfortable with their own skin. We need to stop telling children that puberty is an option, that they can choose what kind of puberty they will go through, just so they can choose what clothes to wear or what music to listen to. Puberty is a rite of passage to adulthood, not a disease to be mitigated. Today, I should be at home with my family celebrating my 19th birthday, and instead I'm making a desperate plea to my elected representatives. Learn the lessons from other medical scandals like the opioid crisis, to recognize that doctors are human too, and sometimes they are wrong. My childhood was ruined along with thousands of detransitioners that I know through our networks. This needs to stop. You alone can stop it. Enough children have already been victimized by this barbaric pseudoscience. Please let me be your final warning. Thank you.
Wow. 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 I heard that when that was first given last year, but to hear it again in light of what happened yesterday, thanks be to God, with the U.S. Supreme Court and its common sense and science approach saying, you know what? We have to turn this back over to the scientists. This is something that's developing, and this has huge complications and implications. And they upheld Tennessee's ban on mutilating surgeries for young people. See, these are the stories that do not get out there in the secular media, just as with the stories of women and men who are post-abortive. Thousands upon thousands upon thousands since Roe v. Wade. Of course, Roe v. Wade was reversed a few years ago, but abortions are still out there. We still have close to 1 million a year. And despite all the evidence and all the testimonies, people are still being lied to, and that has to stop, especially now in this new area of lies. Check out Chloe's website. She's working for an amazing ministry now, donoharmmedicine.org, for more information. It will continue to follow this developing story. We'll be right back. Boy, we need prayer now, and I'm sure Father Patrick Peyton is looking down and agreeing, as well as his vice postulator for his cause, Father David Marcham is with us this morning. Father, thanks for joining us. And boy, Father knew the importance of prayer long before there were all these different studies and things that were out there saying that, as he said, the family that prays together definitely stays together. Good morning. Thanks for joining us. So where are we in the cause of the Venerable Patrick Peyton? And maybe a little background about Father Patrick for those who don't know him, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Teresa, and to all your listeners. Yes, so Father Peyton was a priest of the Congregation of Holy Cross, and the Congregation of Holy Cross is worldwide, but especially in the college football world, and known as the priests who administrate and teach and minister to people at the University of Notre Dame and other colleges, including where I am at Stonehill College, just south of Boston. And so what Father Peyton did in his lifetime was to dedicate his life to spreading family rosary prayer throughout the world. He himself grew up in a family that prayed the rosary each night after dinner, led by the father and mom, and there were 9 kids. He was the 6th of 9 children. And as I say, he went on to live an amazing life of evangelization dedicated to promoting family rosary prayer, both for unity in the family, but also, I think, very timely today for peace in our world.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And what type of impact did he have? And what type of impact do you think is he still having, Father?
Well, it's clear he had an impact in his lifetime worldwide. As I mentioned, he is noted for two things. One of the Rosary rallies and the Rosary Crusades that led up to the Rosary rallies. And the second was his use of media, beginning with radio. He had his first national radio program only 4 years after ordination on a Mother's Day broadcast celebrating peace in our world. And then he moved into film and television, and he used the two of them to help each other to spread the word. In total, he'd do 540 Rosary rallies around the world. And it's estimated that he spoke and preached to 28 million people in total. And
wow.
Yeah, it's incredible. Before St. John Paul II, it was thought that Father Peyton was the priest who had appeared and preached and taught more people in person than anyone else to that time.
Well, if you think about it, too, because he was born in the early 20th century, so there wasn't really a big advancement at that point yet. I mean, it was just starting with radio and communications.
That's right. And he also, travel was not easy either. And yet he overcame any obstacle to go and spread the value of families praying together, especially the Rosary. One Rosary rally that stands out actually came towards the end of his life in '85 when he went to the Philippines. And it was, and it's a long time ago, but I still remember that time period as 40 years ago. But the thing that was going on over in the Philippines was intense political unrest under President Marcos. And at the same time, there was a growing communist insurgency. And Father Peyton got out of his sickbed against the advice of his doctors, and he teamed up with then Cardinal Jamie Sin, and he preached two important messages for the people over there. And the first was the family that prays together stays together, and the second is a world at prayer is a world at peace. And he dedicated the country of the Philippines to the Immaculate Heart of Mary, and it inspired the people to pray for peace. And ultimately, peace did prevail there. And it's incredible. If you go over to the Philippines, you'll see images of Father Peyton. They still talk about how grateful they are that he brought family rosary prayer to their country, which brought about peace in their country.
Wow. Talking with Father David Marcham, the Vice Postulator for the Cause of Venerable Patrick Peyton. Now, Father, do you think he had somewhat of maybe a sense from the Holy Spirit of how Our Lady and the Rosary and those very important practices, not just of the religious, but these practices that have been handed down to us from the saints that are so important in our prayer life, that were poo-pooed or pushed aside during the 60s and the 70s and the 80s. Do you think he had a sense of that? Because, I mean, the Rosary, I think, has a rebirth, and I think mainly because of him.
I agree. So he grew up in a time in Ireland where the family rosary was foundational. It was something that everyone did, almost without exception. And then, of course, we came into the 60s, and then that's when it started to diminish. And so he would have been well aware of that. But because of his life experiences, the foundational aspects of it in his home, and then as he preached to people around the world, he knew of the efficacy, the Holy Spirit, the Blessed Mother's intercession, and also learning through the mysteries of the Rosary the story of our salvation, not to mention the transcendent nature of unifying a family in the grace of God. And so the wonderful thing about Father Peyton was he had great perseverance, and he also learned how to adapt to reach people. So, yes, I think that the fact that the Rosary is making a resurgence, I have no doubt that he is inspiring people through his intercession and his life story you mentioned about his cause, and so what it means to be venerable is that the church recognizes the life of a holy person is heroic in virtue and holiness of life. And the church gives their stamp of approval that this person is to be emulated in this virtue and holiness, and that they can be our intercessors. So I always recommend to people, and it happens in a lot of families, there's discord, or even and I hear this a lot, there are family members worried about other family members not going to church or their relationship with God. Pray to Father Peyton for his intercession to help in those areas in your lives. It could be for your own needs, too, to grow in faith.
That's a great idea. I mean, obviously, I've thought often, and I call on the saints often, especially my favorite, my patron, St. Teresa of Avila, for the intercession of the saints, and St. Catherine of Siena. I like the shy ones and the quiet ones, Father. St. Catherine and St. Teresa.
Yeah.
But no, it's so important, and I think he must be so excited with our new Pope and the beautiful statements I was talking about in the first hour of the program with a couple who has a marriage ministry, and how the Pope is right out of the gate talking about the importance of the family and marriage, and the fact that the family is the place where we encounter Christ. We first encounter Christ, and we need to encounter Christ.
Yes, and I was thinking about when I try to encourage people to pray together as a family, I recognize that a lot of families haven't done it outside of praying grace. And so you've got to break the ice somehow. And I also think about maybe the best way to start is, for couples as newlyweds. So two of them, there aren't any distractions with kids yet. Start by praying the rosary together. And then, as the children come along, they just naturally come into that home that prays together and prays the rosary.
And you've already established that pattern, and the kids get to be a part of that. We will continue this great conversation on the amazing, venerable Father Patrick Peyton, and also the film Pray, the story of Father Patrick Peyton, when we return with Father David Marcham, the vice postulator for Father Peyton's cause, here on Catholic Connection. Stay tuned. Father David Marcham is a vice postulator for the cause of the amazing, venerable Patrick Peyton. And we're going to move now to the film, Pray, the Story of Patrick Peyton. You have to get out there and see it. And this is something really I want to encourage people to do, especially if you don't pray together regularly or you want to do better. And we can all do better at prayer, right? If we're still here, God's not there with us yet. So, Father, this is really introducing Father Patrick Peyton to a whole new generations, I should say, and a whole new audience, correct, the movie?
It is. For decades, people knew who Father Peyton was. They heard it. They saw his billboards. They saw his programs, listened to the radio beginning, and then went to his rosary rallies. And now, as we all know, time is passing by. And so this is a new way to reintroduce Father Peyton to new generations, and every generation needs the power of family prayer. So we're so excited that people can see this film on Father Peyton. They can get, in my opinion, there's something in his life story that every one of us can relate to, whether it's being from a big family, whether it's not having your original dreams come true at first, but persevering and finding either a new path or through perseverance attaining your goals, whether it's just you have to work hard at things. There's so many great lessons in his life story. But above all, it's really a story about his family, about prayer, and about finding what God's call is in our lives, and then following it with everything we have. The second part of the what's woven in through this telling of the story of his life are three regular couples that, in fact, one couple I know from Cape Cod, and the other two couples are wonderful as well. Just regular people. One is former Major League Baseball player Mike Sweeney and his wife. But what's common among all three of them is that when they thought about praying the rosary together, they felt awkward about it. And they're so honest about the challenge, but then they somehow find the way to cooperate with God's grace, they do it, and then they talk about the fruits. And so I think it's a great film to be inspired both in terms of learning about the life of a holy priest, Father Peyton, but also in terms of like, okay, so what does this mean to my family?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. What's the best place to watch the film? How do people get a hold of it, Father?
Easiest way to access it, to stream it, is to go to fatherpeyton.org. You go to fatherpeyton.org, there's a button there. You can, I'm so non-techie, but you can click and it'll take you there, and you can stream it on different services, different platforms. I would highly encourage people to watch it this summer. You know, summertime's a chance to refresh, renew. If you want to be closer to your family and to God, watch this film. I guarantee you will be inspired.
No, I also found a website, praythefilm.com, the story of Patrick Peyton. Is that the same? That's the same documentary, correct?
That's right. You can go there. Again, yes, you're right on. That's where the fatherpeyton.org will lead you. The other advantage of going, and the other advantage of going to the main website on Father Peyton is you can learn more about his life, and also would definitely want to invite people to join us in praying for his cause for sainthood. He's at venerable. There needs to be a medical miracle attributed to him to get him to blessed, and then one more to sainthood. And you never know. Your prayer request, and you have to pray just through him, could be what brings him up to blessed. So I encourage people to do that.
Well, let me ask you, Father, how does one become a postulator of a cause? What does that mean for those who don't know that? I mean, if they don't understand the process. You mentioned venerable, there's venerable, blessed, and then, of course, they become, God willing, a saint. But how do you become a vice postulator for the cause of someone who's being looked at
there's a lot of different routes. Mine is a unique story. I'll give you the brief version. I'm a delayed vocation. I was a physical therapist for 11 years, heard the call to priesthood, studied for 6 years at St. John's Seminary in Brighton, and was assigned to a suburban parish. And while I was there, a big light fixture fell off the ceiling and created a traumatic brain injury. And then as I was recovering, some family friends are Holy Cross, and they said, well, maybe you'd like to stay with us while you recover. And truly in God's providence, that's how I discovered about Father Peyton, and began, as I was getting better, serving as the assistant to the vice postulator, who was then called to be a missionary in Peru. And after 2 years, I was hooked. I just so was taken by Father Peyton's life, his message, family, and praying the rosary, that when they asked me to serve as vice postulator, first I said, you can't be serious. I'm not a Holy Cross priest. I said, don't worry. We think you're the one. So that's not the normal path to becoming a vice postulator. But I tell this story because I think that we need to know that everything doesn't happen in a straight line in our lives.
Right.
And the key is our faith in God, our families, and our friends that support us through challenging times. And you never know how God is going to use you. I mean, I feel so blessed to work on this cause and to work with the Holy Cross folks. And, you know, we have our volunteers that package the rosaries here at Holy Cross Family Ministries. The Catholic daughters, I told them I'd be talking to you, and they're all excited. And so,
I love them.
Yeah, they're wonderful.
They're great.
And so, you know, normally how you become a vice postulator is you have that as a direction in life, you know, usually canon lawyers and all that. But for me, it truly has been a transformative journey that I never would have sought out. But I can definitely see, you know, the goodness of God in the people I've met, and the opportunity to receive all the prayer requests we get, asking for his intercession, telling stories about how he's inspired them. So that's how I became a vice postulator, Teresa.
What's so interesting is you think of St. Paul getting knocked to the ground and losing his sight. You know, my mother used to say, my family's originally from the East Coast. I was raised in Michigan, but I have this book about my mom called Everything's Coming Up Rosy, because she was a tough Jersey Italian. And she used to say, "What, you need to get hit upside the head to figure this out?" And quite frankly, Father, you did get hit upside the head or directly on the head. And sometimes, I'm not being sarcastic, but sometimes we need to have a St. Paul experience for God to get our attention, right?
All my life, I've needed a St. Paul approach. All my life, and I'm not ashamed to admit it. I thank God for those moments.
Me too. Same thing. Absolutely same thing. So when you're a vice postulator, what does that mean? You're reviewing information that comes in, you're reviewing prayers answered. What is the responsibility of a vice postulator?
Right. So there's three main people in a cause. There's the actor, and that person represents the group that is putting forth the cause. Then there's a postulator who works directly with the Vatican, and ours is Valentina Colugione, who's in Rome. And then there's a vice postulator. And the role of the vice postulator is to work with the postulator, with the actor, and with anyone else who's connected to the cause. And it could be prayers, it could be looking into a possible medical miracle. It certainly is doing great things like talking to you and your listeners. It's working on websites. And the way I describe a cause is three parts. You've got the theological, you have the canon law, and you have the medical. And so it could be any of those things happening in any particular day.
Wow. And are you at this point, I mean, no, you don't know, and no one knows. I mean, that comes through the investigation and the research and the reviews of the prayers and all the information. But is it looking good for Father Peyton, do you think? I mean, just your gut feeling about this.
So my gut, my intuition, my observation, it is looking good. By definition, a miracle is rare. And so what we are usually thinking about, and we do have people that write into us and say, I think this could be miraculous. And then our job is to put on our both theological and medical scrutinizing hats and to review. And we've got a couple of folks have written into us that we're at the beginning stages of looking in to see about that. And so those always give me hope. The other thing that gives me hope is what you were just talking about earlier about resurgence of the rosary. And then the other part is this relooking into the importance of the family and our faith and the two coming together.
Yeah.
That also gives me great hope for Father Peyton's cause, because I really believe that right now our families in our world need to be praying for unity and peace. And it has to start at home. That's where so many of us felt our sense of belonging and our strength was in our families. No families are perfect,
right,
but all the more reason to pray together.
Yeah. And I love the fact that our Holy Father, our new Holy Father, Pope Leo XIV, at the very beginning, of course, he's only been Pope for just over a month now, but the very beginning, right out of the gate, as I mentioned earlier, he was talking about the family. He was talking about marriage. He was talking about prayer. And when he was addressing the young people, specifically in Chicago over the weekend via video, he was talking about the longing in our hearts. And don't be afraid of that longing. Go after it. Talked about St. Augustine, our hearts are restless until they rest in thee. I kind of see everything. I don't believe in coincidence. I have a book all about listening for God. I call them Godcidences. I think there's all these different things coming together. We've got this Pope that has got the curiosity of so many people because he's so interesting in terms of his background, a canon lawyer, the head of an order, someone who has such a diversity in his own family in terms of his genetics. It's fascinating how many groups he represents: Italian, Haitian, French, African American, all kinds of different people. And I just think that, as it says in the book of Old Testament book of Esther, for such a time as this. And then you see all these people coming into the church, Father, so many, for example, in Great Britain or France, where the persecution in England, think about the woman praying outside the abortion mill, right? Yeah. And she was asked by the police, are you praying? Well, maybe in my head. And she gets arrested. Not once, but twice. And yet thousands still coming into the church, and in France as well. And then this new Pope. I think God's doing something. That's why I'm very, very optimistic. And now we have Father Patrick Peyton working for us too, right?
We do. He's clearly praying for us, and he's this great role model for us. You know, you're talking about family, and I one of my former patients, when I was a physical therapist, stayed in touch with me, and he's not Catholic, he's not baptized, he's not anything, but his wife and kids are. And he called me up and he said, "Hey, Father Dave, could I become a Catholic? How would I do that?" And I said, "Jamie, where's this coming from?" He said, "Well, you know, I was thinking, I love my family so much." And he said, "I really believe they're going to go to heaven." And he said, "I want to be with them forever."
Wow.
And I said, and this guy is like the most logical, analytical kind of guy. We used to have these great debates when I was a seminarian. But what it made me think about was when Father Peyton says the family that prays together stays together, he not only meant here on earth.
That's a great point.
But he also meant for eternity. And
Amen.
I think we need to keep that broad picture when we're talking about family and staying together here on earth and one day forever in heaven.
Wow, great way to wrap up the interview. Father, what a delight to have you on. Thank you for all that you're doing. Father David Marcham, the Vice Postulator for the Cause of Venerable Patrick Peyton. Check out the beautiful film and the life of this amazing priest, both Father David and, of course, Venerable Patrick Peyton. The film is Pray, the Story of Patrick Peyton, and you can find it at praythefilm.com or fatherpeyton.org. We'll be right back. I hope you really enjoyed the interviews today. I know I did. Father David Marcham, wow. Imagine being the vice postulator for the cause of someone like a Venerable Patrick Peyton who's had such an influence. So cool. We're going to have to play that interview again. Richard and I have already made a check on this one. We're going to re-air that baby. Let me tell you, good stuff in there. Coming up tomorrow, speaking of good stuff, my friend Doug Keck will be joining us, our president and Chief Operating Officer for the Inside Word. He'll give us the scoop so you can take down all the important information about what's coming up for our programming for Corpus Christi weekend, and that, of course, this Sunday. And we are going to be having a procession and a special mass in our little town in central Italy, and I'll be taking some videos and posting them, so you might want to check that out later this weekend. We're also going to be taking a look at media with our Fact Check Friday and what's going on with the media in terms of not only the coverage, as we mentioned the other day, in 2 cents in the second hour of the program, this hour of the program, regarding the studies showing how much the media are in denial about what really happened in Los Angeles, but how they're reacting to the decision yesterday by the Supreme Court and how they're only telling half of the story. Now, you heard the testimony from Chloe Cole that we played this hour. You heard Father Mitch talk about the beauty of the dignity of the human person and how morality usually follows science, okay? Because God is the God of everything. He's a great scientist. He's our great moral compass. And when we follow the way of the Lord, it is going to be best for us in all ways. So we'll talk about that in 2 cents tomorrow, and then a whole bunch of other great stuff coming up. You don't want to miss it, and we will talk to you, good Lord willing, on Friday. Ciao, ciao. On domani.